So we're continuing session 63, and we left off at Jesus' loud cry and expiring, literally, not delivering the Spirit as in John, which the disciples receive on the first day of the resurrection. You have there a sort of Mazorah Kabbalah type of thing, transmission, reception. Um, Here you have the loud cry, and not into your hands I commend my spirit, or anything of the sort, or it is finished. These are all examples of how each gospel in its work of art is putting things that are useful to transmit the message. It's like the painting of Saint Teresa of Avila, with a little dove over her head, and the caption, "Forever I will sing the mercies of the Lord," Psalm 89, an incredibly messianic psalm, by the way. She didn't have a pigeon over her head, a dove over her head, or a caption, but the artist puts that in there to explain things about her, just as he puts her age in that painting, when she was age 67. Now, this is very interesting. The curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom. And so you have here, and not just torn, but split, as in schizophrenia, split mind or something. When Jesus was baptized, the heavens were split, and the Spirit came down upon him, or into him, as a dove. Josephus talks about this curtain, the outer one, looking like the firmament. It was blue with stars and things like that. So this is a real bookend, or inclusio, as the scholars like to call it, something that connects or closes up two parts of this gospel. His baptism, where he gets the messianic package, as I call it. "You're my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Sounds very nice, but it's reminiscent of Isaac and his so-called sacrifice in Genesis 22, Abraham's darling only son. And also the servant in Isaiah 42, "My servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him." This is the first of four, maybe five servant songs, most of them involving suffering. So that you have that. Or you could have the inner curtain, which is the one that I think Jesus penetrates in the letter to the Hebrews, to the real presence of God, opening up for us a new and living way. Hebrews 10:19. But definitely you have this theological element that the curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom. In my dissertation, I get into this, and I recall, different gospels that talk about, you know, um, some of the doorposts, etc., of the temple being shaken. I'm not gonna try to get into that level of detail here, but you have this symbol, of course, of the destruction of the temple. That is one of the themes of this gospel. And you have a lot of Jewish lore about the temple. I think Josephus narrates a voice being heard, "Let us go hence," before the Romans attack, meaning the Lord is saying that I'm leaving the temple now. Just like in Ezekiel, where the Lord leaves the temple by grades and then it's destroyed, then he comes back from the east. And now this is very interesting as far as that bookend. The centurion who stood facing, uh, when he saw that he expired that way, uh, that he had expired that way. I don't know where Jerome gets that because so crying out he expired. This is the New Vulgate. I don't know where they get that. This is an instance of the New Vulgate doing strange stuff. I do good stuff sometimes and bad stuff other times. Here they're inserting a word that I don't agree with at all. It says because so crying out he had expired. You know, he didn't. The centurion doesn't talk about Jesus is crying out. He just says that when he saw that he had expired thus, he said, "Truly, this man was Son of God." Without the article, without the Son of God. The scholars don't think it's significant that this article is missing. But what they do think is that this is a perfect bookend to the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So one of our topics has been that who Jesus really is, and this is part of the Markan presentation, is something that cannot be known or grasped until he's dead on the cross. And the first human to recognize this is the centurion. Otherwise, the narrator, writer knows it. Jesus hears it from the Father in the baptism and in the transfiguration. The demons know who he is in crescendo. You know, the Holy One of God in chapter 1. By the time you get to chapter 5, he's the son of El Elyon, God Most High. Very much Daniel reference to, you know, God Most High. El Elyon. Melchizedek was a priest of El Elyon. Psalm 89 is full of this El Elyon. You know, it's almost like El Al, the Israeli airline. I don't have any stock in it, so, you know, over, you know, to and over. Um, so you have here for the first time how Jesus has died is the occasion for the first human being to say this man really truly was the Son of God. So that's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. As far as crying out, Jesus, I have a couple of notes here that I'm just noticing now. It's supposed to be apocalyptic, but it also has a reference here to Isaiah 40, verse 9, which is a voice cries out, you know, whom shall I cry? What shall I cry? This would be Isaiah 40, which we've talked about a lot or enough, I think, which I can repeat now to sort of recapitulate. This is the beginning of the book of the consolation of Israel, the new Exodus. And I again want to mention Ricky Watts, Rikki, double T Watts, his dissertation, Isaiah's New Exodus in the Gospel of Mark. And so you would have this crying out of someone in heaven. And the prophet then says, what shall I cry, etc. You have a dialogue between the prophet and the divine council. But it's also considered, you know, an eschatological, apocalyptic thing. I think in Thessalonians, that the trumpet blast and a cry. And some scholars have said that. Then in Isaiah 58, let's see what that's all about. Oh, you know, cry out loudly, do not, you know, moderate your voice, etc. And it's some sort of exhortation to the people to right action, etc. I don't think we need to look at that too much. And so we continue with these women who are looking on from a distance. So that's interesting because if you were to look at the Lucan account of the crucifixion, he makes a big deal, I think, of this distance. And Luke, who is, let's say, very pro, Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus, doesn't mention her. And so I have seen very clearly, as many others have, that in Luke, the Psalms are being explicitly fulfilled. And especially, Psalm 88, you've kept my acquaintances and family at a distance, etc. But it's interesting that Mark is also talking about this extremely subtly, maybe not even with a psalm fulfillment idea in mind, but simply as a reality that they weren't allowed to get too close to the cross. And you have the mention of these women that Mark's tradition remembers, and they have a lot in common with other traditions. Mary Magdalene, number one. And Mary, the mother of James the Younger and of Joseph and Salome. I mean, some other Mary, who knows what the reminiscence exactly is. When he was in Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him. Now, of course, Luke in the famous chapter 8 is going to be more explicit about this. Again, number one would be always Mary Magdalene, from whom Jesus had cast out 7 demons. Then some other women. So you have these women who were there when the disciples are nowhere to be found, the male disciples, and many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. Incredibly moving to think that so many women who in Judaism were not favored as far as studies and rabbis were concerned, they follow Jesus in great numbers. So then you have the burial of Jesus. There's agreement that it was a day of preparation for the Sabbath. And then this Joseph of Arimathea, who makes his appearance here for the first time, respected member of the Sanhedrin, of the council, who was also looking for the kingdom of God. Many Jews were looking for this kingdom of God. I mean, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. So I believe this perfectly. John Dominic Crossan saying Jesus was left on the cross to be devoured by animals is his own peculiar point of view. I think Jesus was buried decently. Pilate was surprised to hear that he should have already died. That's very interesting. Remember that in John, they have to break the legs of these guys before nightfall. The Sabbath begins, great Sabbath, Passover. In when they get to Jesus, he's already dead, so they don't break his legs, but they stick in the lance, reminiscent of Zechariah. They will look on him whom they have pierced, blood and water come out. Like a Yom Kippur sprinkling, or I will wash you with clean water, Ezekiel 36, etc. But here, you simply have the statement that Jesus, who could not carry his cross, was already dead. And granted, the corpse to Joseph. And Joseph bought a linen shroud. Here you have the sin dome. I said that the angel or young man in the tomb had a stole, but the naked runner in the arrest of Jesus had a sin dome. Here you have a sin dome. So there's where the sin dome comes in. And laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. And he rolled a stone. He rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. I hadn't noticed that before. So he did it himself, And Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid, so that I guess they had mentioned already this Mary of Joseph. So now they mentioned these two women, but now they mention again the same kind of women that were at the foot of the cross when the Sabbath was passed. So they don't do any work on the Sabbath. Mary Magdalene, always number one. Mary, the mother of James. Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. In Judaism, they don't embalm, they anoint the body. In John, they do it with 100 pounds. Here, they bring things to anoint him on the Sabbath, very early on the first day of the week. So you have this pro-e again that we've seen. The sun had risen. It was still dark in John. You have different accounts. I took a whole course at the Gregorian on the resurrection of Jesus, and it's incredible how the evangelists have no qualms about inconsistencies. They're not trying to come up with a straight story or something. It's different reminiscences, etc. And they go to the tomb and they say, "Who will roll away the stone for us?" Apparently, these two women are not as strong as Joseph of Arimathea. And looking up, they saw that the stone had already been rolled back. It was very large. There's a story about Jacob being able to remove the stone that covers the well in Genesis. That was a stone that only all the owners of the well together could remove. Jacob was strong enough to do it himself. And they see this young man, this Neaniskos again, seated there in the tomb, and on the right side. So these are all special words when you read this, or como like a lectio divina, dressed in a white robe, stolane leukein. I think this is very reminiscent of the those dressed in white in the book of Revelation, um, in chapter 7. I think they have certainly washed and whitened their garments in the blood of the Lamb. So they are dressed in white, and as I recall, these would be stolai type clothing, and they were alarmed. This is a stronger word of the amazement, a stronger word of what Pilate and others have had. And he says, "You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him." Galilee being the new land of the Gentiles, who are the ones who largely accept, Jesus. And they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Um, they were trembling and afraid, and so they said nothing to anyone. And so I'm going to stop there, and we'll try to just finish it next time.